Good afternoon, my conscious co-creators. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I am very, very pleased that you are all here with me today. We've got another fascinating show with an amazing guest, an author I'm really looking forward to bringing on the show. But first, of course, we have our blog post from a couple of years ago, and this one I think is a rather apropos for this time of year. And the title of this blog post is True Rest Comes When We Do Nothing. We often think we need a vacation to rest, to get away from the familiar is what we all want. So we take a trip and run around seeing all we can see. Sometimes we come back more tired than we left. With the limited time we give ourselves not to not work, we push ourselves to get the most out of it. Getting up early each day to see another attraction, another location, another sight. While going away and seeing the beauty of the world is a wonderful thing to do, it should not be mistaken for rest. Travel is a great pastime to expand our horizons and make wonderful new memories. Yet travel is work, not rest. It is another activity we do that fills up our days. Of course, it is usually enjoyable. Yet rest is something else. When we have been working for a long time and our brains and our bodies need a break, sometimes what we really need is true rest. For rest is not about doing something. It is not about going somewhere else. And it is not about stressing ourselves to have a good time. Rest is taking a break. Taking a break from our day-to-day life, or letting go of the need to accomplish or do anything. When we truly rest, we give ourselves a chance to reconnect with ourselves, to just be, without putting any expectation on ourselves. Rest is about truly letting go of all that we think we have to do and to just exist without the need to get anything done. This does not mean that there's not great value in taking a trip or going to someplace new. But let us not mistake that for truly getting rest, for allowing ourselves to just be and giving space to all that we feel. Doing nothing but allowing ourselves to breathe and take time to do nothing. Restoration and rejuvenation only recur when we truly rest. So why do we resist it so much? So I wrote this blog post a couple of years ago after my wife and I came back from a trip. And when we came back, people would ask us, "Oh, did you take a tour? Did you go see this? Did you go see that?" And when we go away and we take a vacation, we do it in a really relaxed manner. Like, we don't want to get up early. We don't want to rush around and do too much and overwork ourselves, because there's so much to do here in New York City. Like, we don't need to run around and go crazy when we're on vacation. As a matter of fact, that makes the vacation the exact opposite of what we're really looking for. And it was quite interesting because I see it so much. It that when people have a vacation, when people go away, they like so have to cram everything in and see every site. And our attitude is kind of, well, if we really enjoy the place, if we really love it, and we want to see some of the things that we missed, we can always come back. We don't have to see everything the first time we're there. For me, it's kind of like a scouting trip. And and I remember like talking to some clients about, oh, did you get some rest over the summer or something? Like, oh yeah, we went here and we saw this and we saw that and we saw that and we saw that. And it's like, that sounds like a lot of activity, but did you get any actual rest? And it really surprises me how much our mindset around doing infiltrates everything. And that the idea of rest, not sleeping, but just resting, just being with yourself, just breathing, just lying on the sofa or on the sandy beach and just looking around and just taking in everything that's around us without having to do anything. That's what rest is. I mean, sure, sometimes, especially if you have families and kids, you don't get enough sleep normally, so sleep tends to be rest. But rest is so much more than sleep. And going away does not have to be about activity after activity after activity. I mean, of course, if you feel like this is a once in a lifetime trip and you don't think you'll ever be back and you really want to see, as much of it as you can, I get that. I understand that. But that's a trip. That's not necessarily a vacation. And there have been many times throughout my life where I thought I was going on a vacation, but what I was really doing was going on a trip. And so, I kind of wrote this blog post just to remind people, especially around this time of year, that there's a real distinction between activity and rest. And regardless of whether that activity is around work or around travel, it's still activity. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've come back from a trip and it was like, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation. I'm sure many of you can relate. So this blog post is really just a call to adding a little more space into our trips, a little more space into our vacations, to just relax, to just not feel like you have to accomplish anything while you're taking a break from work. That actually sometimes the best thing we can do is nothing. But doing nothing is really, really hard for us. We're so programmed into this idea of productivity and that we have to make the most of every minute of life that it really hurts us in our ability to rest. So I guess you could say this is my call to drop all of those expectations. And when you need to rest, to just take the time to rest. Your body will thank you. So that's my blog post. It is entitled True Rest Comes when we do nothing. And of course, you can always find my blog on my personally branded website of theconsciousconsultant.com and on the radio station's website at talkradio.nyc/blog. Now, it is my extreme pleasure to welcome to the show Dr. Roberto Weisz, retired clinical psychologist, consultant, and trainer whose 50 years of practice have moved fluidly across the worlds of Ericksonian hypnosis, shamanic healing, mindfulness, and non-dual wisdom. Roberto is the co-author of the newly released Mindfulness-Based Somatic Emotional Processing, a guide for patients and therapists. He has taught through Southwestern College, the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, Webster University, the University of Wyoming, and New Mexico Highlands University, and served as co-founder and director of the Milton Erickson Institute for Clinical Hypnosis and Behavioral Sciences of New Mexico for 40 years. Roberto's path in this work began well before his career did. Born in Lima, Peru, to German Jewish parents who had fled the Holocaust, he spent his early years moving through Peru, Bolivia, and Chile before migrating to the United States. That early experience of exile and adaptation seeded a lifelong curiosity about the human mind and the resilience of the spirit. His doctoral research in sleep and dreams gave way to decades of clinical practice, community mental health work, and a deep involvement with Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Alongside all of this, drawn by the healing potential of altered states, he spent 30 years studying with shamans and healers in Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, and the United States, letting that knowledge, ancient knowledge, shape and inform his clinical understanding. Welcome to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Roberto.
I'm very happy to be here, hoping we can have a really interesting conversation about important things that your listeners will be interested in.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm just because this idea of somatic healing and a mindfulness-based approach to somatic healing is something I'm really curious about. But I just really want to touch upon the fact that you spent your early life in South America and in different countries, different cultures that are much closer to the indigenous roots than we are here in the United States.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, what about that whole experience really helped you to decide to go on this path of learning to become a therapist, a clinician, and work with people on their healing path?
Well, life experience is our most powerful teacher.
Yeah.
So obviously, my experiences have shaped the way that I have chosen to meet life and to, engage in things that I feel deeply are essential
Mm,
to healthy and productive and kind human living.
mm,
And life offers up so many challenges, no matter where you are, where you live,
yeah.
and who your parents are. And it's the challenges of life that cause us to have to learn how to deal with those challenges. But at a deeper level, they also kind of shape the way that we see life and relate to life.
Mm,
So, in my own life, I was deeply affected by the trauma that my parents suffered, having had to leave Germany as Jews and losing most of their families to the Nazis.
yeah.
So that was somehow passed on to me. And in some way, it kind of created a curiosity and a responsibility around how to deal with the fact that human life is really quite challenging. There's
Mhm.
a lot of pain and loss and change in it. And, we are given certain capacities just genetically and physically, but our consciousness has to grow according to the experiences that it meets and how it responds to those experiences. And so my consciousness sort of, was very interested in what is the healing process? How do
Mm-hmm.
people heal from trauma, from loss, from pain, from all of the, the hazards of human life?
Mm-hmm.
And, in my training as a clinical psychologist, I got all of these, this knowledge about pathology and diagnosis and modes of therapy and all of that. But there was something missing for me. And that was that all of this training really did not mention anything about the fact that we humans are fundamentally emotional beings and that our experience is therefore emotional, and that any efforts to change the way we deal with life have to have an emotional basis in order to deal with the emotional patterns that get developed around trauma, loss, having to succeed, competitive society, all of the things that happen to us that are really very challenging.
Yeah.
Human life is a very challenging endeavor.
Yeah.
And for me, it just became more and more clear that we are fundamentally emotional beings. Emotions are the life forces that drive, shape, define, limit, expand, enable our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't really been taught very much about that side of our nature, which is really kind of strange.
Yeah.
We're taught to be effective and successful and think, in ways that are productive and cause us to succeed and avoid problems and all of that. And this is a very problem-solving kind of orientation, which is very mental, which is okay. We have this formidable human mind that
Mm-hmm.
has these very amazing capacities to solve problems, to learn, to analyze, to develop new techniques, to be scientifically adept, and to solve problems. And we are not really given very much basic teaching and knowledge around the fact that our emotions are the fundamental energies that drive, define, and empower our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I just began to get interested in that because I I realized I wasn't really trained around the fact that we're emotional beings, and I started to look at my own emotions. And I've gone through, and I'm 82 years old now, so in the space of this human life, I've gone through a lot of challenges, and in those challenges, there were a lot of powerful emotions involved. And I found myself just struggling to somehow meet these emotions, deal with these emotions, get
Mm-hmm.
past these emotions. And I found I wasn't very well trained. I just had to kind of find my own way. But I was very lucky to work with a really fine therapist. Her name was Bonnie Badenoch. And in the work with her, I really began to recognize how my emotions needed to be given some kind of support so that they could move through me in a way that helped me to release pain and trauma and to accept new information and to be open to new experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to really look at, well, what are these emotions? They're really fundamental life energies. They shape our experience internally, externally. They drive our behavior. They create, incredible loads of trauma that can
Mm-hmm.
paralyze or really impair the human functioning. And so I really began to more carefully look at, okay, how can we meet emotions instead of trying to solve them or push them away or fix them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what you're talking about is a very sort of body sort of approach
Huh?
to feeling what we feel. I think most people out there, when they think in terms of therapy, they think in terms of talk therapy, CBT, so, again, very cognitive. But given my wife's a therapist and she's a somatic therapist, I know that there's the more recent, and the recent, I mean the last 10, 20 years, has been much more towards a much more body-centered approach to healing and a much more emphasis on sort of the nervous system and the somatic side of this.
Yes. Well, just consider that a fundamental piece of information that most people don't recognize is we experience emotions in the body. We think about them in the mind, but
Hmm.
we have been trained powerfully to give the highest attention and priority to the way we think,
Right.
not to the way we feel. So
Right.
it's not surprising that we try to think our way through our feelings.
Right.
Why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Who's to
Yeah.
blame? Um, why did I get myself into the situation in the first place?
Right.
So we have been so powerfully conditioned to think and problem solve and mentally find solutions to our challenges. And at some level, if you have to create a financial plan. This really effective mental mind is really capable of doing that.
Right. Right.
But we have been taught to somehow mentally work with our emotions. And
Hmm.
there are some really powerful limitations to that because we do not have control over
Right.
our emotions.
Right.
But we are taught that we're supposed to have them. If we can't control our emotions, we can't succeed. If you want to
Right.
be effective, women get a lot of this in professional life, you have to stash your emotions in a locker over there so they won't be interfering with your functioning. And
Right.
that kind of information is really misleading and dangerous because we are emotional beings, but we don't have the capacity to mentally fix or direct or deal with our emotions.
Mm.
But we're supposed to do that anyway.
Right. Right.
So coming back then to this fundamental reality that we actually experience emotions, feelings are felt in the body.
Right.
The mind comes in and creates a story about it. I'm feeling this way because
Yeah.
so and so did that to me, and they have history of that, and the whole the situation is stacked against me, and blah blah blah, and it goes on and on and on. But if we just begin to bring attention to our emotional experience where it's happening, that's the mindfulness part. And
Mm.
mindfulness is a very particular quality of attention that allows us to be present with, to witness, to
Hmm.
really notice and be receptive to what's happening in the absence of efforts to judge or fix or evaluate or analyze. So that's the mindfulness piece. It's really a very clean and open and receptive mode of attention. But we're not taught very well how to do that.
Yeah.
We're taught to fix our attention on how to solve problems and how to make things happen or how to learn quickly or how to impress people and be successful.
Right.
So this is a new kind of orientation. The territory of emotions is the body. So let's meet them where they're happening. That's what this work is about. That's why it's called mindfulness-based somatic emotional processing. And it's not that the mind is in some way involved. In witnessing, the mind is involved in being curious and open and receptive. That's a very
Mm.
specific, focus that with a little bit of training we can get really good at. But we don't get training in
Mm.
that kind of focus. Our
Right.
training is to focus the mind on making things happen,
Right.
not to
Right.
witness. But witnessing is a really powerful and important function in human experience. When we're really present with something, whether it's with a Van Gogh painting or a sunset or a beautiful flower, and we simply are open and curious and receptive to what we see, things
Hmm.
begin to happen.
Hmm.
So attention is a way in which we focus energy on what we're focusing on. So if
Right.
I'm noticing how I feel this pain in my heart because of what I feel is happening in Gaza to all those people,
Hmm.
if I focus on the pain in my heart and simply notice that pain
Hmm.
and start breathing more slowly and deeply and just stay with my awareness of that particular pain in my heart, it begins to move, it begins to change, it begins to show me something about itself. And that's what we mean about the somatic part. The emotions
Hmm.
are happening in the body. If we pay
Hmm.
attention to how they're happening in the body, non-critically, just with a curious, open kind of receptivity, that is moving some energy through the nervous system in a way that supports some kind of an inherent intrinsic capacity for what I call somatic processing. It's not that the mind is not involved, but
Right.
the processing is based on our attention on where the emotions are being experienced in the body.
Mm. And really, I want to kind of emphasize one point that you mentioned is that there's sort of a couple of aspects to it. So the first is there's the actual feeling or emotion.
Mhm.
But then what we as human beings do is we create all these stories around it.
Exactly.
And those stories make it almost more challenging to kind of be present to the emotions because the stories cause us to feel like it's our fault or all these, a million and one different interpretations
Exactly.
instead of sort of putting the story on the side. And what you're talking about is just being present to this is what I'm feeling right now, not why I'm feeling it, not, this is because my parents abused me when I was a kid or so and so did this to me.
Yeah.
But this is just what I'm feeling in my body right now in this moment and just paying attention to that.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, and this can be experientially verified every time we do this, when we do that, we can begin to notice that things are beginning to move inside,
Hmm.
not in terms of the mind's activity, but in terms of the body's experience. So,
Hmm.
in the body's experience, we're seeing that our focus of attention on how we're feeling what we're feeling is beginning to cause some changes in the way we're feeling it.
Hmm.
And that's the verification that this kind of attention does begin to move emotional energy in a very interesting way that eventually allows the body to somehow digest that emotional experience.
Hmm.
Digesting is kind of a metaphor, but it processes it in some intrinsic way and it begins to move and eventually it begins to release. And what we can do is we can actually witness that happening as a physical event, a series of physical events that are in the body. So this is a very engaging process because we begin to actually notice that something is beginning to change, something is beginning to move. But we want to
Hmm.
stay away from why is it doing that and what is it
Hmm.
going to give to me? We just stay present in that witnessing focus so that we're just noticing. And in that noticing, we're open and receptive. And in that noticing, we're moving energy through the body because where attention goes, energy goes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as we're moving that body, something begins to happen that keeps changing. The sensations keep changing. Sometimes the sensations move to another part of the body, and then often
Hmm.
people will start noticing, I can feel something moving down my legs. And
Hmm.
it's almost like the body is actually releasing that emotional energy that we've been trying to solve with all this mental activity, but doesn't go away. But when
Hmm.
we meet it with our attention in the body, this kind of processing intrinsically just spontaneously begins to happen. And when we stay connected to what it is doing, which is actually very engaging, we can feel the energy moving around. It changes. Sometimes it moves to another part of the body. Then it begins to in some way release. And then when the energy has been released, our relationship to that emotional experience is different. It is not
Hmm.
as charged as it was, so we can actually see more clearly what actually happened. And
Hmm.
when we can see more clearly what actually happened, there is some really important learning that comes to us out of that experience because we're learning from our own experience of witnessing our experience, more clearly understanding what was really going on and what that tells me about what the part that I played in that experience. And then that
Hmm.
begins to help me to know myself better because I'm
Right.
approaching my experience in a different way. And my experience is teaching me rather than my mental desire to solve the problem is teaching me.
Yeah.
It's just a very different approach, but it's actually very simple and very productive. And anybody who's interested in doing it can do it. You don't need to have a degree in psychology to do this work.
Right, right, right. Which is why your book is for both patients and therapists. It's not
Exactly.
just a clinical book, but it's a book for just everyday people.
Exactly.
Um, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I do have a couple of questions about how people who have have had very challenging experiences in the past that it can be a little bit difficult for them and how to kind of deal with that. And then maybe we'll give our audience some tools, some practices to help them to
Yeah.
just dip the toe in the water at least. Okay.
Okay.
All right, wonderful. So, everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this every Wednesday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on talkradio.nyc and all over social media. And we'll be right back with our guest, Dr. Roberto Weisz, in just a moment. Are you a spiritual seeker? Are you interested in expanded states of reality? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will dive into these topics with authors, teachers, researchers, and guides. Tune in at our new time, Wednesdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Wednesdays, 12 noon Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. So Roberto, um, I mean, I've had the experience of working with clients in the past, not as a therapist, but just as a coach or a guide, where they, the client had been, let's say, suppressing some really challenging emotions and feelings most of their life, just to survive, just to be able to function in the day-to-day world. And the idea of even just being present to what they're feeling is a very, very scary prospect for them. So when somebody has absolutely no experience being mindful or being present, how do you recommend someone just start? Like, how do you just begin to dip your toe in the water?
Well, it's not very difficult. It's really a matter of how we focus our attention.
Okay.
And when people struggle with their emotions, they're focusing their attention on somehow trying to make the emotion go away
Mm,
or, stop bothering them. And
mm,
and all of those efforts are ineffective. So the struggling against emotions tends to increase the level of anxiety about what's happening because the struggle is not succeeding. And so we're getting the feedback, we're losing ground. This isn't working. I'm
mm.
failing. But we're so powerfully trained to struggle, to
Yes.
make, difficult experiences go away, but they don't go away when we struggle. That's the simple truth. So
Right.
instead of, that's something that we can present to that person. Let's just try doing something different. Can you begin to notice how you are feeling what you're talking about, how you're feeling that in your body right now? And some people might be able to say, well, yeah, I feel a tension in my chest. It's hard for me
Mm,
to breathe, and my throat feels tight.
hmm.
And some people might not be able to notice that. So in that case,
Right.
we could just direct our attention. I notice that your breathing is really shallow and there's some tension in your jaw.
Mm,
Can you begin to recognize that? So yeah,
mm,
there's a very simple process of simply redirecting attention, focusing attention on something that's really obvious, and then supporting the client's attention on that experience.
mm.
So it's not very complicated. And when people just begin to do that, we're shifting the way that they're trying to deal with their agitation or their upset or whatever it is.
Right. Right.
But we're accepting, there's something going on there that's clearly emotional. Let's see what you can notice about how you're feeling that in your body. And if when they say that, if they can locate it, and if they can't, we can help them to locate it. Just begin to notice what's happening as you continue to just focus on that pain in your chest and just
Mm,
breathe a little bit more slowly and deeply. That's basically the approach. And
mm,
when people begin to notice things, we just support that. Yeah, uh, that tightness in your chest is now beginning to feel more more heavy, or it's vibrating, or it's moving to your shoulders. Okay, if it's moving to your shoulders, just keep on noticing how you're noticing that experience in your shoulders.
Mhm.
I can see that they're pretty tense. Can you notice how tense they are?
Mm.
And we just maintain that focus on the body's experience of emotion. And as we do that, we are number one, taking the person out of their struggle into a different focus, which is just noticing instead of trying to push it away. So
Right.
we're
Or
changing
making
the
a story
situation.
about it, right? Because
Yeah.
what happens, I've seen with most people is they start telling a story around the feeling right away.
Mhm.
And to get them to come back and just focus on the feeling is rather difficult because they run into the story.
Yeah. So that's in this kind of work, the most frequent prompting from the counselor or the therapist or the guide is, and how are you experiencing that in your body right now?
Mm.
Can you just notice what's happening in your body right now? So we can notice people keep going back to this because they're trained to think about it
Right.
and fix it and
Mm.
struggle with it mentally. So in a very simple way, we just redirect attention. That's the most important thing.
Mm.
We keep redirecting attention to how are you experiencing that story in
Mm.
your body right now? And
Mm.
as you're doing that, just keep noticing how your body's feeling it. As you're noticing that tightness in your chest and the tension in your jaws, also just begin to slow your breathing down a little bit. And the purpose of that instruction about the breathing is that if we can slow down the breathing, number one, we're bringing attention back to the body. And number
Mm.
two, the slower breathing helps to regulate the nervous system so that the person
Mm.
is more effectively regulated and they can process more effectively
Mm.
by staying focused on their body. Very
Mm.
simple instructions, but they actually do some really direct things to the nervous system that allow processing to happen and that allow the nervous system to release some of the agitation that it's creating for itself.
Mm. How do you work with someone if they're kind of stuck in a loop where they like they feel this pain in their body, they tell the story, then they feel the pain in the body, and they tell the story, and they feel the pain in the body story, and it just keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and they just loop around, and nothing seems to move.
Well, that's a challenging situation, but again, uh, just one step at a time, 1 second at a time. And
Mm.
how are you noticing that in your body right now? Because
Mm.
when we direct attention to a direct experience as opposed to a mental process, the
Right,
nervous system begins to function differently. It's getting a different input.
right.
And what we're doing here is we're changing the input into the nervous system from all of the agitating details of the story to simply noticing the sensations of the emotional activity in the body. So we're moving from something very complicated and very exhausting to something very simple and
Mm.
very calming and very
Mm.
focusing. So
Mm.
the process itself helps to create a different mode of functioning in that person's nervous system, a different focus of attention, which is inherently simple, but it begins to move that emotional energy in the body in a way that releases agitation rather than a way that increases activation.
Mm. Mm.
So we're shifting from the normal process of getting stuck and struggling with the story to
Right.
a very different process, which is very simple and it doesn't engage in struggle. We don't have to struggle with a sensation. We just notice it. And there's something curious about this sensation that maybe attracts our attention a little more because something is beginning to happen and we're beginning to feel differently. And
Mm.
that helps to shift that that general situation from staying stuck with the story and the details that are agitating and difficult to deal with
Mm.
to something really simple, something really concrete, something very physical, something that's directly present and verifiably there in this moment. So
Mm.
we keep coming back to this moment, as opposed to all of the details of the story that happened over the last 10 years and all of
Mhm. Mhm.
that stuff, which is what it is. There's something to that story and there's ways to deal with that, but this is
Mhm.
something different.
Mhm.
That allows us to get away from all the mental struggling into simply a mental witnessing of the physical experience of the emotional event. Very
Mhm.
simple. And simply coming back to that over and over again is
Mhm.
what we do to help that process continue to move forward.
Mhm. How do you help someone who there's a lot of fear around feeling the feelings because they feel like it'll overwhelm them, that it's so intense and so strong because they haven't felt it for most of their life,
Mhm.
that now that they put some attention to it,
Yeah.
that it just feels overwhelming.
Well, again, see, the overwhelming feeling comes from the repeated experience of going into the story and struggling with that
Uh,
story. So we're
mhm.
offering them a different reality, which is
Okay.
very directly available as a physical event in the body. It's
Mm.
not an abstraction. It's not a concept. It's not a story. It's a
Mm.
physical, concrete, direct sensory experience in the body. And if necessary with some people, I might spend 15 or 20 minutes just helping them to recognize sensations in their body. So for
Uh,
example, try squeezing your fist really hard. Now notice how that feels. Notice the
yeah,
sensations in your hand and your forearm and in your
yeah.
elbow and your shoulders. Just notice that and just keep paying attention to that. And now just notice what happens as you simply pay attention and the tension begins to release from your hand. Just keep noticing. So a little bit of sensory training for those
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
people helps them to recognize it's not dangerous to be present with your sensations. See, we want
Mm.
them to be present with sensations rather than the whole horrible story about the abuse and the betrayal
Mm.
and all the lies and the lack of help and the struggle with all of that, which is in the story.
Yeah.
We don't deny the story. We don't try to get
Right.
rid of the story, but the
Right.
story is telling us something about what we need to work with now in a very different way, which is to stay present with how that story, but actually the emotional energies created by the story,
Right.
is being experienced in a very direct way, in a very concrete way, in a very physical way in the body. So we move from mental to physical. That's the shift. But when we
Mm.
do that, we're shifting the functioning of the whole system and allowing it to function in a different way that is inherently relaxing, supportive, and it really supports the processing of those experiences in a way that releases some of the emotional energy that's trapped in the system around those experiences.
Right. Right. So it's constantly redirecting the person back to the body, back to the body. What's the feeling? But that was good to hear about, like having some kind of exercise, because there's some people who
Mm.
they can't even feel their body. They can't even feel their feet on the floor because
That's
they're
right.
so dissociated, they're so disconnected to it, that
Precisely.
just the whole idea of feeling their body is a new adventure for them.
Yeah, and we want to shift it from an idea to a direct experience.
Right.
And
Right.
direct experience is something that's very simple. Just notice how you're tensing your fist. And now
Right.
slowly begin to, so there's no struggle around that. There's no phobia around that. There's no complications around that. It's very
Mm.
concrete. It's very here and now, and it's very
Mm.
experientially verifiable. And
Mhm.
that's the beauty of it. It's direct, it's simple, it's happening now, and it's here. And when we pay attention to it in a really curious and open way, things do begin to happen. And so as those things begin to happen, that begins to capture more of the attention of that person because things are
Mm.
beginning to happen and they notice that they're relating to that situation in a somewhat different way that is
Mm.
more accepting, more curious rather than aversive.
Mm.
And they realize, oh, this is actually something that's really happening in
Mm.
my body. I can notice it now, and I can notice that I can begin to feel differently. And that encourages them to stay with the process.
Mm. Is it helpful to have them just name what they're feeling?
Yeah, for some people it's helpful to name it, but if that's helpful, it's fine. It's not necessary because the name is a label,
Uh,
you see, and then the label has certain kind of connotations to it
Connotations to
or
it.
implications to it. So we want to stay with the experience rather than the label.
Mm.
That's the difference, you see.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's truly being very experiential.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, this idea of mindfulness is a very sort of Eastern
Yeah.
concept, but you have a tremendous grounding in sort of indigenous cultures and shamanic wisdom
Yes.
from South America. Um, how did you bring these two together? Like it sounds like they're two very different but complementary sort of approaches to things.
Yeah. Well, the The shamanic world is basically there to redirect attention of the people from their idea of the problem to their direct experience of their relationship to the natural world.
Mm,
Shamans are the bridges between the people and nature. And the function of the shamans, basically, no matter what practices they engage in, is to reconnect the people who are in disarray or in distress back to that which is the greatest resource to them in their lives, which is the natural world that they live in.
mm,
And in those cultures, people have a very direct relationship to that natural world.
mm,
They go into the forest and they can smell, they can hear, they can see the signs, and all of that is not abstract mental activity, it's direct sensory experience. And
mm,
that direct sensory experience is where humanity learned most of its most important skills. Paying
mm,
attention to what's happening around them and learning how to respond to what's happening around them in a way that supports survival and a good living.
yeah, 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 yeah. Um, your book, again, it's a guide for both patients and therapists. So I'm
Yes.
curious, like what in the book would you say is more towards the supporting the therapist, and what in the book is more towards supporting the client?
Well, the first half of the book is for the general reader,
Okay.
including the therapists. And in that first half of the book, we just present the basic aspects of this process and show people how to approach it in a very simple and direct way. Just begin
Mm,
to notice how you're feeling that in your body.
mm,
Continue to just be aware of the physical sensations and keep breathing a little bit more slowly and deeply and just notice what's happening. That's the basic
mm,
instruction.
mm,
The second half of the book is for therapists, and it's a little bit more technically and clinically oriented for the
okay.
professional therapist. But
Mm,
any interested layperson, if they really like the first half of the book and they want to learn more, can
right.
continue to deepen their knowledge of the process in the second half of the book. So it's really,
Mm,
the interested general reader, after reading the first half, if they feel that practice is really supporting them, and you really begin to use it in their life, and it's also a really great support tool in dealing with, the people around you, your loved ones, your family, your friends, your closest colleagues, who are experiencing some emotional distress. It's not that you can be their
mm,
therapist, but you can help them to begin to orient to their difficulty in a different way by
mm,
simply beginning to notice how they're feeling, what they're feeling in their body.
mm,
It's
mm,
that simple and that approachable, but it can be taken to a high level of clinical skill by professional people who are interested in learning it because number one, it's very simple. But as we keep working with it and our experience with it continues to grow, it becomes a very sophisticated tool for dealing with emotional issues.
beautiful, beautiful. I, I'm curious, 10, 15 years ago, I never heard anyone talking about the idea of somatic healing. I mean, I've heard of mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn made mindfulness very popular, I don't know how long ago, maybe 30, 40 years ago. Um, do you see just in general more of a movement towards the somatic side of therapeutic healing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's been getting stronger and stronger, and there are more and more offerings in that kind of arena.
Yeah.
And there's also just the whole movement toward using physicality and movement as a therapeutic tool for not
Mm,
only physical ailments but emotional issues.
mm,
Yeah, because we are fundamentally emotional beings, no matter what's happening to us,
yeah.
whether we have arthritis or polio or multiple sclerosis or heart issues or anxiety or relationship issues or self-loathing or a lot of anxiety.
Mm,
And these are these are all ultimately experiences that have an emotional component. And when we begin to address that emotional component, change begins to happen because when you really think about it and when you begin to feel it more, healing is an emotional process, whether it's physical healing or emotional healing. You have to address the emotional issues inside of that experience in order for healing to be possible.
mm. I'm curious just for you personally, when you kind of got on this track of somatic healing and then this mindfulness-based somatic processing, what surprised you most about this as you first started to engage in it?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. What surprised me was that it was so real and so natural and so approachable. And why have we neglected it for so long?
Hmm.
And I just began, in my entire training and the first, 30 or 40 years of my practice, I just wasn't oriented to that. But when I began to orient to the emotional side of things and not emotions as a problem to be solved or, to be diminished by powerful medications so we could be more tranquil and less bothered,
Hmm.
that emotions are such a fundamental aspects of our functioning, and they really underlie our capacity to engage any experience or to respond
Hmm.
to any experience. But we have neglected them for so long, and as a result of that, we have developed a really rather aversive and minimalist and uncomfortable relationship to our emotional side. We
Hmm.
relate to it as a problem that needs to be somehow fixed. And the medical
Hmm.
profession has approached that in terms of, medicines that diminish our ability to feel.
Feel, right.
Antidepressants basically inhibit our emotional experience in order to, create less problems around the most intense emotions. But our approach to that societally has been really ignorant and deplorable, really,
Yeah.
considering how fundamental emotions are to every aspect of our functioning, including any kind of healing process that we want to engage in.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point that in the society we tend to try and flatten things out so that the challenging emotions don't bother us so we can quote unquote be functional.
Mhm.
But that also flattens us out for the positive emotions too, for the good feeling emotions.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how this work affects people feeling on the positive side of things.
Well, like I said before, when we do this work consistently over a period of time, we literally develop a more receptive, more respectful, more interested, more curious, more uh, desirable relationship with our emotional nature. And ultimately, what this work is about is changing our relationship to our emotions
Hmm.
so that we don't deal with so many of them as problems that need to be dealt with, but
Hmm.
as aspects of our humanity that
Hmm.
need to be met and
Hmm.
deeply deeply met and really engaged because they are such a fundamental aspect of our humanity. They drive every experience, shape every attitude.
Hmm.
They have such an important uh, part to play in our human life. But we've developed this attitude. Well, there are certain emotions that are desirable, okay, happiness and gratitude and all of that, and certain emotions to be ignored or pushed away or condemned, but definitely not met. And that has, I think, limited our capacity to really engage our humanity more fully. And that's very regrettably. And that's very regrettable. And that's part of the reason that I wrote this book. It's not just about showing a process, but really helping people to recognize that we really ought to and want to develop a kind, accepting, respectful relationship with that aspect of our human nature that we have so powerfully ignored and described as a problem to be solved.
Hmm. So I'm going to tell on myself because I talked about sort of positive and negative emotions, but what you're really saying is it's not about an emotion being positive or negative. That's just the story we tell about the emotion.
Right.
The emotion is just the energy, it's just the feeling, and it's just being
Yes.
present to it, regardless of whether it's a comfortable or uncomfortable emotion, that there are really no positive or negative emotions. They're just energies, they're just feelings. And what it sounds like what you're really focusing on is helping people just to be more present on what those feelings are in the moment.
And as they do that, they are beginning to relate to that aspect of their humanity in a much more respectful and helpful and I would say honest way. Um,
Mm,
when we meet our emotions and know them better and know how to be present with them, we are literally developing a different relationship with our basic human nature. We are
mm,
literally beginning to relate to ourselves in a way that's more authentic, more open, more honest, more
mm,
receptive. And
mm,
then we take that quality of relationship that we begin to develop with ourselves, that openness, that receptivity, that curiosity, that willingness to be present. Then
mm,
we take those aspects into our relationships with other people, and then those relationships are more authentic, more honest, more emotionally frank. And I think that allows us to function at a better, more honest and higher level of our human capacity.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Roberto. Um, you've taught in so many different universities. You've worked for so long. It's grateful that you're still out there putting this message out. If people want to learn more about their work, is there a resource online for them to go to?
Yes, there's a website. It's www.mbs, I'm sorry,
SEP?
mbsep
Yeah.
.com, mbsep. So that's all about this process, and there's also a way there to access our book. And we've, of course, you've talked about the book that we've written. I've had a co-author whose name is Daniel Blackwood, and this is the book. It's
Ah,
available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, and Inner Traditions.
beautiful.
3250. And this book is really, it is a guide for everyone who's interested.
Mm,
And it
mm,
takes you through all the steps of learning the process. And there's tons of experiential exercises that allow you to try your skills
um,
and to become experientially acquainted with the work. So we've made every effort to make this work really accessible, really approachable. And as when people begin to use it, they can see for themselves how helpful it is for themselves, how helpful it is in supporting the people that they love, who,
mm,
we all experience emotionally powerful events that are difficult to deal with. And if someone can really help us to be present with our emotions in a different way and begin to process them in this way, we are then able to support the people that we care about,
mm.
as well as supporting ourselves. So that's the idea. And then therapists who want to learn this process can begin with the second half of the book and then maybe take our trainings. And we offer trainings in this process as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So again, that website is mbsep.com for mindfulness-based somatic emotional processing. Dr. Weisz, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on my show. It was a pleasure to have you on the Conscious Consultant Hour.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, and I've really had a good time interacting with you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And of course, thank you, my loyal listeners, for tuning in each week. Without you, there is no show. And don't forget, if you did miss any part of today's show, you can always catch the replay on talkradio.nyc and all over social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Twitch, and on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon. Take care, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you all next week.